On this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out, we recap the Montreal Canadiens win over the Tampa Lightning 3-2. Was it a dirty hit by Mikhail Sergachev on Josh Anderson? And our thoughts on Jonathan Drouin being benched. Was that the right move by Martin St. Louis going with that decision? And also, the Montreal Canadiens defensemen, they look like Norris Trophy candidates now. What's been the difference now compared to the months before? Plus, the bonus questions on this week's episode of Hockey Inside Out. Welcome into another edition of Hockey Inside Out. I'm your host, Moe Khan, alongside Stu Cowan, Rick Green, and Andrew Berkshire. Gentlemen, let's dive into it. The Habs had a big win over the Tampa Lightning 3-2 on Tuesday night. A lot of oohs and ahs, but the big storyline to come out of it at the end of the game was it a dirty play by Mikhail Sergachev on Josh Anderson, who might be out for a while going towards the final 12 games of the regular season.
I think it was a dirty play in terms of it was a hold. I don't think it was much more than that. I don't think there was any intention behind what happened. It's just the speed at which Anderson plays the game, the net drive that he has. Sometimes things like that happen. I do feel awful for Josh Anderson, though. This was the season where he was finally on pace to play 80-plus games for the first time since 2019. And now he's going to end up missing as much time as he did last year because I'm assuming he's not going to come back this year. It makes no sense to push it with 11 games left and what looks like an ankle injury. Those are never short-term, right? You're looking at least a month, and there's not a month left in the season.
Yeah, I agree, Andrew. I mean, I don't think it was a vicious play by Sergachev. As soon as Anderson crossed center ice, he was so determined he was scoring an empty net goal. I mean, he was head down, going 100 miles an hour, going to get that empty net goal and pad his stats, also put the game away. Sergachev sort of had a hold on him, and it looked like Anderson lost his balance as much as anything. And I was thinking back to, thankfully the post actually came off its mooring. I remember back to when Serge Savard broke his leg in about 8 places when the old moorings they used to have. But it was ugly, like the replay when the way his ankle went, your ankle's not supposed to bend that way. So you either, I'm not a doctor, but you figure it's either a broken ankle or a high ankle sprain. High ankle sprain might be worse. That's what Brendan Gallagher apparently was going through earlier this season. But yeah, I think he's done for the season. And I feel bad for him because Josh Anderson's really played well. He didn't want to get traded at the trade deadline. He was really happy he stayed in Montreal. He loves playing for Marty St. Louis. He drives a lot with that Canadiens team. Big body, hard to stop, and that's what happened. Sergachev was trying to stop him, and Josh Anderson at full speed is almost impossible to stop. So it probably could have been a minor penalty for holding, but I don't think there was anything vicious by Sergachev. I think he was just trying to hold him off, and it's unfortunate the way Anderson went down. Both feet went up in the air and landed on his tailbone, it looked like, and then, as I said, the way his ankle went into the goalpost, that was pretty ugly.
Like the guys had mentioned, I feel really bad for Josh. He was one of the best players on the team, for a good part of the year, and you see something like this play out, and it's really unfortunate. But I mean, if you look back at the play, I think they were fighting for position. Josh, like usual, going 100 miles an hour, determined to get to that puck. So they were kind of battling for their space, and it looked like Josh kind of, obviously lost his footing and landed really hard and getting into the net the way he went into it. Hopefully it's not as severe as, the way it looked, from the outside. But anyways, it's one of those years. The guys finding ways to get hurt, looking down the list. It's just one after another. And, the year and the league is tough enough to win when you have everybody healthy, but when you start to see bodies going down like this, it's really a shame and really difficult to keep the team spirit. But anyways, it's all part of it. Everybody has to deal with it, but it's not easy to see when something like this plays out so often.
Yeah, and if you're watching,
it is a bitter end to Anderson's season. After I feel like he's been such a positive topic of conversation, right? Because we talked repeatedly about how much Anderson has diversified his game this season, right? And I feel like even in recent games, he's made plays where last season's Josh Anderson would not have even thought of making those plays. He set up a Gurianov goal, I believe, like last game against Tampa, where he just had this like nice little shoulder check that Josh Anderson from a year ago or 2 years ago wouldn't have made because he's got those horse blinders on. He just wants to drive the net. He's making good passes to his teammates. He's slowing up in the neutral zone at times to create lanes for himself to be open for passes, for zone entries. Like, he's added elements to his game this season that we've never seen before from Josh Anderson. Credit to the coaching staff and him for doing that. So it really is bitter to end his season this way. It just would have been nice for one player for the Montreal Canadiens to have a full season where we can go end to end and say, this is what this player accomplished.
Yeah, and with Anderson, I think some fans maybe underestimate the leadership qualities he brings to this team. In Pierre Gervais, the former trainer's book, he talked about that run to the 2021 Stanley Cup final. And he said the leaders in the room were Carey Price, Shea Weber, Corey Perry, and Josh Anderson. So those were the guys who were running that team. As he mentioned in his book, like Dominic Ducharme never lost the room because he never really had the room. It might be a similar situation, Rick, to when you guys this 1986 Stanley Cup with Jean Perron coaching. But it just shows you that the leadership qualities that Josh Anderson has, he brings a lot to this team. And the fact he really wants to play in Montreal, he wants to play here. His dad grew up in the West Island of Montreal, a huge Canadiens fan. He wants to be a part of this. And as you mentioned, just with the injuries, it's just, after the game, they announced that Caden Gooley's done for the season with a high ankle sprain. There's a lot of talk with the Canadiens medical staff. There's no doctor or medical staff can prevent what happened to Josh Anderson or what happened to Caden Gooley when he went down behind the boards in that game against Florida. But what really surprised me is why Caden Gooley was allowed to come back and play in that game after that injury. They're down 9-5. They're out of the playoffs. There was no reason for him to come back. You understand why the kid wanted to come back. He'd already missed a lot of time with a knee injury. These guys want to play. Rick, you know that more than anyone. They want to play. But sometimes you got to protect these guys from themselves. And I think at the end of the season, what Canadiens management needs to look back on is injuries happen in this game. It's so fast. It's so high-paced. They're running into boards. Guys are going to get hurt. But I think they need to look at protecting players from themselves more going forward. There's so many guys now. Brendan Gallagher looks like he came back too quick from his first injury. Mike Matheson, the same thing. You look at Caden Gooley, and Gooley also injured his shoulder in a game. I think it was against Pittsburgh and was allowed to come back and play afterwards. So players always want to play, but somebody in the medical staff has to step up and say, you're not going back on the ice. Take your skates off. You're not playing anymore.
And it is a fine line between, whether or not the guy's able to play without risking further injury. And they're leaving it up to the player, and some of the decisions maybe are not the best ones. The doctors and the so-called specialists say this, that, and the other thing. This is what I feel is going on there. But the players ultimately say, you know what, they know their pain threshold. They know everything else that has got them to the NHL to put those bumps and bruises behind them and find a way to play. But this is an extreme year of serious stuff that's happened, and I'm sure there's going to be quite a few discussions on how they handle moving forward to find a way that this kind of stuff doesn't happen too often.
Brendan Gallagher mentioned he learned earlier there's a difference between being injured and being hurt. But with the adrenaline of the game going on, sometimes it's hard for players to honestly differentiate between the two. And Brendan Gallagher said, moving forward, he's going to have to be more honest with himself and more honest with his body and maybe shut himself down, because he's been Brendan Gallagher, he's been his own worst enemy. For so long. The style of game he plays at that size, the way he comes back. I wrote a column this week. I remember being at a practice in Nashville earlier this season. He went down really hard in the corner, got up. He was down for a while. And when Brendan Gallagher doesn't get up, he's hurt. Went back to the bench, and then 3 minutes later, he was back in the practice. And, he played the next game. He was hurt, and he was out for 32 games. So it's sort of, I asked him about it, and he said that it was a really tough practice. They got blown out the game before in Washington on New Year's Eve. And it was sort of, he wanted to be with his teammates. He wanted to go through that grueling practice with them, which says everything you need to know about Brendan Gallagher as a teammate. But in hindsight, it was a mistake for him to keep playing in that practice. And then, he played one more game, and then he was gone.
Gentlemen, when you look at it right now, with Josh Anderson probably out for the rest of the year, and whoever's left right now in the war of attrition that we have with the bodies going down, who steps up now to replace Josh Anderson that you're going to see kind of showcase their skills going towards the final 11, 12 games of the regular season?
Oh, for me, I think it's got to be Gurianov a little bit, right? He's got that speed. He doesn't have the physicality that Josh Anderson has, but maybe he can find it a little bit. He's got a big frame. Maybe he can start driving the net a little bit more. But it has to be a team effort, right? They just don't have the horses overall to have – like, there's a next guy up mentality, but they don't really have guys to fit specific roles or specific play styles. They're just kind of cobbled together from what they have left. So you can't really expect too much, but I think having Kirby Dach back in the lineup really makes a difference. And if Brendan Gallagher can stay healthy for these last 11 games and, build something towards next year, he can replace some of the grit factor that Anderson brings as well.
I mean, Anderson's a little bit bigger than Gurianov, but on the ice, for some reason, Gurianov looks bigger than Anderson. He's just huge and the way he can skate. And, being physical doesn't necessarily mean running guys into the boards and running all over the place, throwing body checks. That's sort of Michael Pezzetta's style as a fourth-line guy. But you can use your size to your advantage, and Kirby Dach's a perfect example of that this season. The way he protects the puck, the way he goes to the net makes it hard for defensemen to stop him. The way he goes behind the net, he almost had a goal against Tampa where he went behind the net, swung around, had a backhand. He's a big, big body, and he's hard to stop. So Gurianov, I agree, Andrew. He's a guy who's got to sort of step up now and fill a little bit of that Josh Anderson role, going hard to the net, playing hard. Not don't need to run guys through the boards, but just make yourself hard to play against.
And let's face it. Yeah, let's face it. Their options are limited. The good news is, they can't deplete Laval anymore. The good news is they're getting some guys that are coming back from injury that'll fill those voids, and hopefully they'll run into some of these guys returning, getting back on the shelf again, because the troops are getting pretty thin.
Yeah, Jake Evans has been practicing with a non-contact sweater, but he looks really close to returning to the lineup.
Speaking of voids, Martin St. Louis decided to have a void in the lineup over the weekend in Tampa when Jonathan Drouin had a first-row seat, which he was paid to watch the game, and not play against the Lightning over the weekend. Your thoughts, guys, how St. Louis handled this situation with Drouin not playing over the weekend against Tampa?
Well, Rick will be able to answer this better than me afterwards, since he's been a coach and a player in the NHL. But, at first there was reports that Drouin had missed the meeting. Then it was he showed up 2 minutes late. But if he did indeed show up 2 minutes late, I don't think you show up 2 minutes late once in the season and you get sat on the bench for a whole game. I think this was probably an accumulation of things. I know Stéphane Waite, the former goalie coach, and Pierre Gervais, the former trainer, on French media saying that Drouin had a habit of showing up right on time for meetings, right when they were going to start. It used to drive Claude Julien crazy. And I imagine it probably drove Marty St. Louis crazy also. And he showed up late. And not only did he show up late, he showed up late after they got blown out 9-5 by the Panthers the night before. He was on the ice for 3 of the Panthers' 7 goals in the first period. He finished the game -2. And then you show up late for practice the next morning, or for a meeting the next morning. His alarm didn't go off or whatever, but this constant actions have consequences, and he showed up late. I'm sure Marty St. Louis would have preferred to make him a healthy scratch, but when Goulet was hurt, they didn't have enough bodies, so they had to dress Drouin to have 18 skaters, and I'm sure he told Drouin before the game, you're not going on the ice. And, after it was done, Marty St. Louis said, it's over. We've dealt with it. He said, I respect the way Jonathan handled this. He was cheering guys on the bench, and we're going to move forward. And he did. Drouin played against Tampa, scored a goal. He was playing on the second line. And I think it sent a message not only to Drouin, but more importantly to the younger guys on the team that Marty's not going to accept this kind of thing moving forward. That's a pretty strong message I think he sent, and I think it was a good one.
Yeah, I thought it was a little harsh, but I did believe that it was a perfect opportunity for Marty St. Louis to send a message that everybody is held accountable. And, you have to follow the program here on and off the ice to keep with the philosophy of what he's trying to bring in. And, it was embarrassing, I think, for Jonathan Drouin, rightfully so. But, it was a chance for everybody to take note, say, listen, this is a real deal. We can't play around when it comes down to business, and we have to make sure that we do all the right things. And, it didn't affect Drouin's play. I was wondering how he would respond, and he obviously came out like nothing else happened the game before. So Drouin has been one of their top players, point getters in the last stretch. I give him full credit for responding the way he did. But ultimately, I think the message has been sent from Martin St. Louis saying, listen, guys, everybody has to be responsible for their act on and off the ice. No questions asked. So there's a strong message that's been sent there, and I think everybody took notice and will remember it.
Yeah, I like what Stu said as well. That this is a message not just to Jonathan Drouin, right? This is a ripple through the entire organization that it's not going to be tolerated if you're late. If a meeting is mandatory, it's mandatory. You better be there. And I don't know about you guys, but being late is one of my biggest pet peeves. I can't stand waiting on people, especially if it's like a restaurant or something like that, and you're sitting by yourself holding the table. It drives me nuts. So I'm sure that a professional situation like what Marty St. Louis is running here, you don't want to wait on guys. You have limited time as a coach. You want to get things done so you can move on to the next thing. So a message was sent. Was it maybe a little bit harsh? I guess so. I don't know. Rick could probably answer better than we could whether it would hurt more to be a healthy scratch or to be stapled to the bench the whole game. Like, at least on the bench, you're around your teammates, I guess, but probably a little bit more embarrassing to just be sitting there and never take a shift. But again, like you guys both mentioned, Drouin took it really well, scored in the very next game. I think it was very fortunate that it was also against Tampa Bay, so we can kind of move past the narrative of, Drouin had this thing happen right as they were playing his former team. And I think another factor that we haven't mentioned here is the boys were down in Florida. They got blown out. When a team in the winter of Canada is down in Florida, usually they go out and have some fun in the warm weather down in Florida. So I'm assuming that there was possibly a chance that many people could have been late. So Drouin was the guy who happened to sleep through his alarm. It happens. I think the organization and Drouin have probably moved past it pretty quickly.
I don't know if that stuff ever went on, Andrew, that guys came to practice the next day with a red face. It's like you said, it's the timing is tough when you see that, the guy that he got traded for is on the ice, and so much controversy about that trade, and he's sitting there watching the play happen, and that's that feels bad. But like I said, it's not so much an individual thing, because the relationship supposedly is very good with Martin St. Louis, but as a group, they said, "Oof, wow, this is serious stuff. We won't cross that line anymore."
Yeah, I'm like you, Andrew. Like, people showing up late. I mean, it's like my time's more important than your time, type of thing.
Exactly.
You have a whole team sitting there waiting, and you can't show up on time. There's that old saying: if you're not 10 minutes early, you're late. That's something I've tried to drive into my kids. Like, be on time for stuff. Don't walk into your classroom the second the class is going to start. Get where you're going early. And I think that's the message that Marty St. Louis wanted to send. I don't think a lot of Habs players now moving forward will be hitting the snooze on their alarms on their phones. When they said it, it'll be like, get out of bed and get ready and let's go. And you wonder, like Jonathan Drouin, it seems unlikely he'll be back with the Canadiens next season. So you wonder what impact this might have on other teams, maybe in the summer, looking to sign him as a free agent. But he has, as you mentioned, he's been, last 22 games, he has 2 goals and 17 assists. He's been producing, and I feel bad for Jonathan. Like, being around Jonathan, I like him as a person. He's a really nice guy. He's had a hard time here with the pressure, dealing with the pressure here. We know what happened when he went to the Stanley Cup final, and he had the problems with sleeping and anxiety. He's had surgery on both wrists. It's been just a really rough ride for him here in Montreal. This doesn't help. But moving forward, I think for Jonathan, I asked him last week, and I said, in a perfect world, would you like to be back with the Canadiens next season? And he said, yes, I would. He likes playing for Marty St. Louis. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think the best thing for Jonathan right now is to move on and get a fresh start somewhere else. And I think that's what's going to happen. And I wish him the best moving forward. I hope things go better for him in his next stop than they have here in Montreal.
But I wonder if this was a situation, if the Habs were still in the playoff race, they're 2 points behind, would Jonathan Drouin would have been benched? I don't know. It's that what if scenario.
I think so.
Yeah,
I think so too.
Yeah.
But let me just say, even from the old days, being punctual was part of the unwritten rules. And Larry Robinson, as much as I love him, he would be the worst guy on the whole team to look at his watch and wait till 30 seconds before a bus was leaving or to get on a bus or to be in a meeting, and then he would walk in. And I remember him saying that he did that. He pushed the envelope when he was the assistant with Jacques Lemaire in New Jersey, and Lemaire couldn't take it anymore, so he left the bus. He told the bus driver to leave and leave Robinson behind. So, I mean,
one of my favorite stories of the time is Scotty Bowman. When we'd have, let's say, a midnight curfew on the road, he would give one of the doormen a hockey stick and tell them to get all the players who showed up after midnight to autograph it. So in the morning, the guy would give him the stick, and Scotty would know everybody who was out past curfew.
Well, if you want to draw conclusions here, Rick Green's in Florida right now. The Habs were in Florida last week, so maybe they were hanging with Rick Green. You never know. You never know.
We keep hearing about how close the alumni is now under the Hughes administration.
I never went out in Florida when I was here.
Never. You're in Boca Raton, right? What's the do in Boca Raton anyway, right? So.
Is Brian Scribbin down there with you, Rick? If he is, then I believe that might have been the case.
Yeah, that's trouble. No, he's not allowed with me anymore since Montreal days.
Well, for the Montreal Canadiens, it was a lesson learned for Jonathan Drouin. Let's see what he can do in the final stages of the regular season. Perhaps he can give himself some more points and a chance to play elsewhere. And who knows what could happen for this team moving forward ahead. Well, on to the final question for this week. The Montreal Canadiens defensemen, they have been playing very well of late, producing all the points, 6 goals, 28 points as of the game against Tampa. What's been the difference now compared to before, guys, and how they've been much more influential in the offensive end of the rink?
Well, I think off the get-go, I think St. Louis has allowed all of these guys to be a bigger part in everything from joining the rush offensively to leading the rush. And if you look at the personnel with Matheson, Harris, Gooley, Barron, I mean, all these guys have great mobility and are able to get up into the play. And look, if you watch a number of the games now, which was unheard of before, where you'd have defensemen staying basically on the blue line, but that's no longer the case. They're down in behind the net. They're circling. They're involved. They're making things happen in the offensive zone cycle. So this obviously is not a problem for Martin St. Louis, and the result is they're shooting more. They're more involved in every part of the play. They're not leaving it to the 3 forwards to make things happen offensively. So they've been given the green light to say, jump in there, make something happen, help them out, and the results are obvious. They're racking up some points, and they're able to chip in offensively. So they have the personnel back there on the blue line. They can skate well enough that they can be involved in a lot of the offensive zone stuff and still be able to get back. So that's a nice luxury to have when you have that type of mobility on the blue line. And they seem to be getting a pretty good idea when they should go and when they shouldn't go. Still got some work to do on the defensive zone stuff, but they're going the right way, and their contribution is obviously big at this point.
Yeah, I mean, how much of this comes down to Mike Matheson, right? He's just been so incredible all season long when he's been in the lineup, and now he's finally getting the goals to go in for what he's been shooting, right? Like the first stretch that he was in the lineup, he was getting some assists, but the goals weren't really there. And when he was putting the puck on the net, like he was firing it really well, and it just wasn't happening for him. So now he's gotten that regression in the positive way. But I think there's other factors at play here as well. I think Justin Barron has also been fantastic, specifically in terms of his playmaking, his passes through the middle, through the neutral zone. His breakout passes have been really astonishingly good. He's added elements to his game that I don't think many people expected when the trade happened. He was kind of labeled as a defensive defenseman, but he's added a lot of offense and transition to his game over the last year or so. It's very impressive. But also, over the last 10 games, the Canadiens have the second highest shooting percentage in the league at 5-on-5, 12.8%. After the Edmonton Oilers. Now, save percentage is prone to fluctuation over the course of the season. There's, things that you can be doing correctly at the right time that can drive that for sure, but there's also random variation. Like, for example, the Joel Edmondson goal on Tristan Jarry a few nights ago. I don't think most people think that's a repeatable goal for most goaltenders in most situations. It was a really weird play. Sometimes that happens. Sometimes there's a cluster of those kinds of plays in a stretch of games. And the Canadiens, I think they're playing really well. They're working extremely, extremely hard against very high-level competition. But the only team shooting at a higher percentage than them is the Edmonton Oilers. And I think people would argue the Edmonton Oilers might be able to sustain that because of the talent level in that team. The Montreal Canadiens, I think it's more of a blip along a long season.
Now, I was going to say the answer to this question is 2 words, Mike Matheson, Andrew, and you took the words out of my mouth. I mean, he's just been so good. He's got 7 goals and 10 assists in the last 21 games. He leads the defense, and he's got 8 goals to lead all the defensemen. Second is Arbor Jackguy with 5, and he hasn't played in a month. And Matheson's missed 34 games. So you factor all that in. The game against Tampa, he's so good, Matheson, at just getting shots through from the point on net. It's not the big slapper. He walks the line until he finds a lane, an opening, and he gets the shot through. The game against Tampa Bay, he had a goal. He was +3. He had 5 shots on goal, and he logged 25 minutes of ice time, just over 25 minutes. He also blocked 3 shots. I mean, he's turned into just a really good all-around defenseman, not just offensively. And what a beautiful skater. I mean, he's so much fun to watch him skate. He just glides on his skates. But it's interesting you brought up Justin Barron too, Andrew, because during training camp, the Canadiens and the preseason, they gave him every opportunity to make this team. I think he played every preseason game. I don't think he sat out any. They wanted him to make the team. This is the guy that got in the Arturi Lehkonen trade, former first-round pick, and he just didn't look ready to play in the NHL. So they sent him to the American Hockey League. And what a smart move that was. You look at him now. They played him a ton in the AHL. He probably got some more confidence offensively with the puck. He's come up and he's played really well, and he's gotten better every game. And I think, Slavkovsky, who also didn't look ready for the NHL when the season started, and you wonder if they had gone the same route with him, if that might have been better, or if they at least send them to the World Juniors when they had a chance. But Barron's an example of time in the AHL doesn't hurt you, especially for a young player. Go down there, play a ton, less pressure on you. Play in every situation, and he's come back up, and he looks like a totally different defenseman than the one I saw during the preseason when he looked timid. He looked like he didn't know what to do. He was slow in decision-making. He wasn't physical enough for his size, and it's night and day since he's come back. So that move by the Canadiens really worked out well, sending him down to the AHL and playing him a lot, and he's going to be an offensive defenseman moving forward, and they've got quite a few of them, Jordan Harris and others coming up through the pipeline. So, and when they played against Colorado, Marty St. Louis talked about how Colorado plays positionless hockey. Like, they're all over the place. Their defense basically play forwards, or forwards drop back. And that's something Marty said he'd like to do moving forward. That's the type of game. He says, we're already doing it a little bit now. But that's something to watch moving forward. And Justin Barron's a guy who can do that. And Mike Matheson's a guy who can do that. And Jordan Harris, defenseman who can skate, who can move the puck, who are smart. So it's going to be fun to watch these guys moving forward.
And
Justin Barron's actually got 8 points in his last 9 games.
Who's that?
Justin Barron.
Yeah.
And you have to give full marks too to Savard and Matheson too, as veteran defensemen, showing these guys how to play. These kids are taking note on the details of the game, and they're helping and grooming these young kids to understand how they have to play the game. And they're smart enough and obviously responding in such a real positive way. Great to see.
Last week I mentioned about the future of the back line, right? Lane Hudson, Logan Mailloux as well in London. He's playing very well for the Knights as well as you speak. Stu, you made the point that there's going to be a glut of offensive-minded defensemen, and this might play into Kent Hughes' hands that he can maybe offload one guy to bring in an established player down the road here. So the Habs right now, positionally speaking here, could be set up to have that robust element of more offensive-minded defensemen that can definitely be used for trade value down the road.
Well, Lane Hudson, I mean, what a year he's had in university hockey this year. I mean, he fits right into that positionless hockey that they want to play. I think one thing to watch moving forward, too, is for the Canadiens, hoping Joel Edmondson can stay healthy the rest of the season and play well, because I think they want to move him. I think they would have wanted to move him before the trade deadline. Hard to move a guy when he's not playing, but moving forward, they got to open up spots for these young defensemen, and Joel Edmonton's more of that stay-at-home type big rugged defenseman. They have that in David Savard. I don't think you need 2 guys like that moving forward. I think David Savard is a guy they'd like to keep. I think he's become a father figure to these defensemen. He plays really well with Caden Gooley. He's played really well with everybody he's played with. So I think if Joel Edmondson can stay healthy through the end of the season and get interest from other teams, I think the Canadiens will move him, opening up spot for another young defenseman coming up. But Hudson's a guy I'm really, watching the highlights of him playing university hockey this year. Man, is he good. I remember when they drafted him, last year's draft. I mean, he came up to the podium, he was wearing a sweater. It looked like he had borrowed his father's sweater that was like 3 sizes too big for him. He's a little guy, but man, can he skate. And that's a guy that, positionless hockey, that's the new NHL. That's the way it is. I think it's the same thing. You're more of a basketball guy than me, Mo, but I know in the NBA, it's become that way too, where guys just go all over the place. Yeah. Now we're seeing that more with hockey.
No question. It'll be fascinating. It'll be great. Go ahead, Rick.
No, I was just going to say, let's not forget Jacky, that, we sang his praises quite often this year as a big part of the hockey club, and on the way he's handled himself both offensively and defensively. Big body, tough kid, young guy, great future for him, to be part of the mix to, shore up some of those areas in the defensive zone when you've got the other guys going offense only. So.
Yeah, Jackie's a younger version of right. Jackie's sort of a younger version of Edmondson with more offensive potential, as you mentioned earlier. He's got 5 goals this year, and he's also, like Mike Matheson, Arber's really good at getting his shots through from the point. It's not just a big wind up and blast it and get it blocked. He walks the line, he looks for a lane where he can shoot, and he gets a puck through. So yeah, you're right, Rick. That's another guy. They've got a lot of young talent on this Canadiens blue line. They'll need to shore up defensively, as Rick, you point out often on this show, but there's a lot of talent there to work with. I think Stefan Robidas deserves credit too. When they hired him coming from midget hockey to coach, it was all about development. I know he worked in development with the Maple Leafs, and you talk with the defensemen in the room, and they really like him. He's a little bit like Luke Richardson in that he doesn't get angry, he doesn't yell at guys, he's not a screamer, everything's positive, everything's constructive criticism. And I think he's done a really good job. And the play of the rookie defenseman this season speaks volumes about what he's been able to do.
And I like Robidas because he believed me when I told him never trust the forward. And,
you coached him, right?
From that day forward, I always liked him.
Well, if Oprah Winfrey was here, she would say, you have a defenseman, you have a defenseman, you have a defenseman. The Habs have a robust amount of depth to work with, including Jaden Struble as well down the road. So we look forward to seeing how this plays out in training camp in September and what they do. Don't forget to submit your questions and comments here at Hockey Inside Out. We look forward to conversing about that on a future episode. Check out the YouTube page for Hockey Inside Out and sign up for the newsletter at MontrealGazette.com/newsletters. And for full episodes and bonus content, head on by Hockey Inside Out as well. On behalf of Stu, Rick, and Andrew, wish you a great week. We'll speak to you soon. Bye for now.